As a little kid, I was completely amazed. This decade was a golden era for Chinese kung fu movies. At the heart of it all was Bruce Lee, a young martial artist who was charismatic, fierce, and capable of superhuman stunts. These stunts were so incredible that if they weren't recorded, no one would believe them. Join us as we dive deep into the story of this remarkable man who blurred the lines between belief and reality. One of his most fascinating feats was the one-inch punch. This move is often considered the original Asian fusion, and Bruce Lee was the one who bridged the gap to American culture with a popularity that few could have predicted. Imagine a packed arena, everyone on the edge of their seats, waiting for the first attack. Standing just a few meters away was the legendary Bruce Lee, surrounded by his sparring partner and several martial arts students. Their eyes sparkled with the same longing as the crowd. Lee stood just inches from his opponent, studying the scene like a true master. He knew exactly how to make the crowd go wild. The chair on the stage was proof that he had done this before and didn't want to hurt his sparring partner. At just the right moment, he pushed out his fist, and down went the other guy, straight into the chair that had been perfectly placed to catch his fall. This was the one-inch punch. Imagine standing just 1 inch away from your opponent and delivering a strike so powerful that it could knock him off the ground. It wasn't about muscle mass or physical size, it was a skill that only a true martial artist could master, just like Bruce Lee did. Every fan who has walked the same path of knowledge and discipline can appreciate this incredible move. The one-inch punch is so astonishing that if it weren't recorded, no one would believe it. But how did he do it? The secret lies in the brain rather than raw power. For Bruce Lee, the idea was to travel a tiny distance in mere milliseconds. It wasn't just his arms moving, it was his entire body working in harmony. Jessica Rose, a biomechanical researcher at Stanford University, studied this move extensively. According to her analysis, Lee's lightning-fast move actually starts with his legs. In incredible footage, you can see his leading and trailing legs straighten with a rapid explosive knee extension. The momentum travels straight into his hips, then his shoulder, and finally thrusts his arm forward. Everything happens so quickly that it makes Lee look like a superhuman. Apart from being one of the most impressive martial artists ever, this particular strike is incredibly hard to replicate. On the surface, it looks like a simple strike that shouldn't have the effect it does. But once the one-inch punch makes contact, it combines the power of some of the biggest muscles in his body into a tiny area of the opponent's body. The idea is to deliver a powerful punch from a tiny distance into a small part of the body. If you thought the one-inch punch was impressive, wait until you hear about Bruce Lee's two-finger push-ups. The two-finger push-ups are legendary. Bruce Lee could do 1,500 push-ups at a stretch without breaking a sweat. But what's even more impressive is that he could place his entire body weight on just 2 fingers and do it non-stop 200 times in a row. While most people struggle to complete 10 push-ups, Bruce Lee proved he possessed superhuman abilities with his two-finger push-ups. His record remains unbroken to this day, certified by the Guinness Book of World Records. Although several people have tried to break it, none have succeeded. For instance, Ali Vali's Qad Shahi, an Iranian martial artist, currently holds the record for the most two-finger push-ups done in 1 minute, managing to do 74 within 60 seconds. However, he still couldn't beat Bruce Lee's record. In 1995, Paul Lynch from the UK broke the Guinness World Record for the most consecutive one-finger push-ups, grinding out 124 before giving up. While that's impressive, it still doesn't come close to Bruce Lee's record. It's safe to say that Lee was a once-in-a-lifetime athlete with abilities that may never be replicated. Even Joe Weider, known as the father of bodybuilding, described Bruce Lee's physique as one of the most defined he had ever seen. But was all this just for show? Did the push-ups help improve his fighting abilities? The truth is, Bruce Lee's two-finger push-up routine was part of his personal martial arts philosophy known as Jeet Kune Do. As a master martial artist, he combined various fighting techniques, including Tai Chi, Wing Chun, street fighting, and even boxing. The first time he demonstrated this incredible stunt was at the Long Beach International Karate Championships in 1964, wowing the crowd and cementing his legacy as one of the best to ever do it. But if his two-finger push-ups don't impress you, let's talk about his actual fight records. Bruce Lee had some of the most iconic fight scenes on television, from his brutal fight against Chuck Norris in the Roman Coliseum to his 10 versus 1 scene in Fist of Fury. Did he actually fight in real life? The short answer is yes. However, most of his fights were not recorded on camera, as he preferred to fight in secret. The good news is that we have real footage of a Bruce Lee fight filmed during the 1967 Long Beach International Karate Championships in California. In this footage, you can see Lee facing off against a few of his top students. While this was an actual sparring session, Lee wasn't trying to end his opponent like in the movies. This might explain why his moves aren't as lightning fast as you'd expect. Thanks to California law, the fight had to be done in sparring gear. Bruce Lee is marked with white cords throughout the fight. You can see him keeping an effortless distance from his opponent while dodging every shot sent his way. He stands like a trained killer, quietly studying his opponent's every move. From the clip, it looks like he knows what his opponent will do before they do it. His attacks are quick and precise, landing every single time. Imagine a fighter throwing and landing every punch and kick during a fight. It sounds impossible, but then again, it's Bruce Lee. While the student desperately lashes out, thinking he sees an opening, Lee is only baiting him, launching a counterattack that leaves the opponent almost severely injured. Judging by Lee's fighting style in this footage, it's safe to conclude that he was more calm and calculated than he appeared in his movies. His style was distinctly different from other martial artists of his time. Instead of focusing on a single martial arts style, he learned to mix multiple styles to create a combination that no one has ever been able to replicate. One of the most famous stories is the fight between Bruce Lee and Wong Jack-man. This fight was documented in the July 1980 edition of Official Karate magazine. It follows a real-life account of a duel between Wong and Bruce Lee. If it weren't documented, many would doubt its authenticity. The duel took place in the winter of 1964 at a small kung fu school in Oakland, California. Bruce Lee, then a 24-year-old martial artist weighing about 140 pounds, faced off against Wong Jack-man, who weighed 135 pounds and stood at 5 feet 10 inches. There were no rules, no referees, and no safety equipment. The only source we have is Bruce Lee's wife, Linda, who recalled that 13 people were present that day in her book, Bruce Lee, the Man Only I Knew. She documented the fight. Bruce Lee and Wong Jack-man bowed formally and began to fight. One adopted his Wing Chun style, throwing a series of straight punches, but Lee was faster, and his punches landed harder. Wong's men tried to stop the match just a few minutes in, but James Lee warned him to let it continue. The attack became so intense that Wong actually turned and ran. Bruce soon caught up with him and, with one swift motion, brought him to the ground. Wong surrendered, and the fight was over almost as quickly as it started. This swift victory depicted Bruce's incredible power. However, according to Linda, it also pushed Lee to train harder to perfect his unique fighting style. This story has been disputed many times, especially by Wong himself, who claimed he wasn't beaten to a pulp or begged for his life. Unfortunately, the only person who could confirm or dispute this story passed away a few years after the fight. Now let's talk about Bruce Lee's favorite weapon, the nunchaku. Bruce Lee starred in 5 popular movies featuring the nunchaku, making it synonymous with him. However, what many don't know is that he initially hated them. While nunchucks have been a vital part of martial arts for about 400 years, they weren't the weapon of choice in the 60s and 70s. Most martial artists preferred the Chinese sword. Everything changed in 1971 when Bruce Lee brought the nunchaku into the mainstream, thanks to Dan Inosanto. During one of their training sessions, Inosanto introduced Lee to the idea of using nunchucks in his movies. At first, Lee dismissed the idea, calling the weapon a worthless piece of junk. However, Inosanto was persistent and eventually convinced Bruce Lee to try it out. Just 3 months later, Lee had fallen in love with nunchucks, swinging them like he had been doing it for a lifetime. According to Inosanto, the first time Lee used nunchucks in a movie was in Fist of Fury. The action sequence in that film gave nunchucks massive publicity, making them cool again. There was even a scene in Game of Death where Lee had a nunchaku fight with Inosanto himself. Although the movie was never completed before Lee's death, the released footage showcased his incredible nunchaku skills. As wild as these clips may appear, they pale in comparison to the real-life footage of Lee playing against a professional ping-pong player using nunchaku instead of a racket. Lee summoned his superhuman abilities and incredible reflexes, countering every attack and eventually defeating the professional player in his own sport, all while using equipment not designed for that kind of sport. Many have tried to wield nunchucks, but they are incredibly hard to use. Many have walked away with injuries while trying to master this simple yet lethal weapon. Speaking of lethal weapons, did you know that Bruce once broke an opponent's skull with his bare hands? The story of Bruce Lee vs. Yai Nikaki is one for the books. In 1960, Bruce Lee was challenged to a fight by Nikaki after introducing Chinese Kung Fu at the Seattle Edison Technical School. Nikaki claimed that Chinese Kung Fu was too soft to be lethal and decided to challenge Bruce to prove his point. Initially, Bruce declined the challenge, not wanting to cause trouble. However, his disciples pushed him to prove himself in combat. Nikaki sent one of his disciples to say to Bruce, "If you want to enter the hospital, accept the challenge." This triggered Lee, and he decided to accept. The fight was arranged at the YMCA handball field in downtown Seattle. Very few spectators were allowed, but what they witnessed would go down in history as one of the most impressive martial arts fights ever recorded. A kick to the nose, blood splattering everywhere, and an opponent kneeling on the floor in just 11 seconds. Bruce Lee completely destroyed Nikaki, almost ending his life in the process. Nikaki's face was cracked, and the left side of his head was so swollen that his eyes were barely visible. Surprisingly, Lee wasn't interested in rubbing his victory in Nikaki's face. He warned everyone present to avoid talking about the fight to preserve his opponent's dignity. If punching a hole in a person's head doesn't sound crazy enough, wait until you hear about the time Bruce Lee broke a 45-kilogram sandbag with his kicks. Bruce Lee was known for his powerful punches, crazy nunchaku skills, and incredible reflexes. But did you know he also possessed lethal power in his kicks? One day while training, he kicked a 45-kilogram sandbag so hard that it literally broke. This was achieved using a special kick known as the super-ride kick. The record was certified by the Guinness Book of World Records, proving it actually happened. There's also a story about how Lee kicked a 135-kilogram sandbag 5 meters into the air. Imagine the sheer force required to throw something that heavy into the air with just a kick. If this feat wasn't recorded, no one would believe it. Speaking of recording, did you know that Lee's movie directors once claimed they just couldn't keep up with his lightning-fast moves? When The Green Hornet was released in September 1966, it introduced Bruce Lee to a much larger audience, spreading the gospel of Chinese martial arts. Although he was just a sidekick, Lee's fighting skills were so intense that he stole the spotlight from the lead character. However, filming the movie was tough. Bruce Lee's action scenes were so intense that the cinematographers couldn't keep up. According to the book Bruce Lee, A Life by Matthew Polly, Lee displayed a lot of confidence in how his kung fu skills would look on screen. He was disappointed when he saw the first footage because everything looked blurry. The scenes had to be filmed again, and this time Lee had to slow down his movements so the kung fu would look better on television. This was crucial, especially since kung fu wasn't popular in American productions at the time. Most fighting scenes were tailored to slower Western fighting styles. To prevent this issue in future movies, Bruce Lee shot them at a higher frame rate. This way, when he made movies like The Big Boss and Enter the Dragon, he didn't have to slow down his moves, allowing him to produce electrifying performances every time. The secrets behind Bruce Lee's abilities aren't really secrets at all. Every achievement he recorded as a martial artist can be traced back to his exercise routine. Bruce valued his cardio routines above everything else. He would run 2 to 6 miles on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. On the remaining days, he would ride his bike for about 10 miles, followed by an extra 20 minutes of jump rope workouts. Experts believe he alternated running and cycling to avoid boredom. His flexibility exercises allowed him to kick high, even reaching someone as tall as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who stands at 7 feet 2 inches. To achieve that level of flexibility, Bruce constantly stretched his body beyond its natural limits. He practiced high kicks, forward bends, side bends, waist twisting, alternate splits on chairs, and wrestlers bridging. Doing this almost every day allowed Bruce to deliver impressive performances, whether on screen or in the ring. Beyond regular workouts, martial arts training was a significant part of his routine. Those who knew him claimed he spent more time perfecting his martial arts skills than anything else. This is why he looked more like an athlete than a bodybuilder. Here's a glimpse of his training schedule. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, he focused on punching training. He practiced shadowboxing, spent time on the heavy bag, did footwork drills, and occasionally sparred with other fighters. The remaining days were dedicated to perfecting his kicks, practicing with the heavy bag, and sparring. While there are no actual pictures of Lee lifting weights, he did a lot of weightlifting. However, his goal wasn't to boost his appearance, he wanted to build the extra muscle needed for real-life battles. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the incredible life and legacy of Bruce Lee. His contributions to martial arts and film continue to inspire. Subscribe to our channel and thanks for watching.